Hi, I'm Oliver, and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Deep Cuts essential time today, folks, and today I'm talking about the legendary band Can's fourth record, Ege Bamyasi, released in 1972. Before we go any further, Ege Bamyasi is a Turkish word. It's quite difficult to say. There are many different ways people seem to pronounce this record. This is the way I'm going with. I've done my research and this is what I've ended up on. Let's not have the comments section full of ways that I should have pronounced the title of this album. Let's just talk about the music, please. Can are, of course, a German rock band, part of the krautrock scene in Germany, famously alongside bands like Amondul 2, Ashra Temple, Faust. If you don't know anything about krautrock, today's your lucky day, because I actually did a 5 albums to get you into krautrock ages ago. So I pinned it at the top of the comments section, and it'll also be a link at the end of this video if you want to check out a little bit more about krautrock, where it came from, and some of the key records. The group was a quartet consisting of Ermin Schmidt and Holger Suke, two musicians who actually studied under Karlheinz Stockhausen, an absolute powerhouse of 20th century music, someone that you definitely need to know about because his influences is so wide-ranging. The group was completed by Michael Caroli on guitar and the incredible Jackie Liebergeit on drums, one of the most lyrical drummers I've ever listened to. His loose style encourages this sort of ebb and flow, which is very much the sound of Can, and specifically this record, Ege Bamyasi. The group had a number of different vocalists throughout its lifetime, but during the most important phase, which is the album's Future Days, Soundtracks, which is a compilation, Targo Margo, and then Targo Margo's follow-up, Ege Bamyasi, Damo Suzuki was the vocalist, a fascinating figure. Suzuki actually left his native Japan to go and busk in Europe, and this is where he was spotted by members of Can, and they decided, you know what, you shouldn't be busking on the street, you should be creating strange, otherworldly music with us, and luckily, that's exactly what he went and did. Suzuki's erratic, playful, unruly vocal performances perfectly complemented the kind of music Can were making, and so he very much also helped to define this period of Can's creativity. Can's style is hard to define exactly. It sits somewhere between psychedelia, rock, we have a dancey funk in places, the electronic experimentation, there's elements of R&B in there, there's the more avant-garde processes and techniques defined by someone like Stockhausen, his influences here. Ege Bamyasi is an album with depth, even if it seems like it's not on a first listen. I feel like of the two albums, Targo Margo is a lot more immediate. I think everything clicks with you, everything's more in your face, whereas with Ege Bamyasi, there's a muted vibrancy to it. And there's a simplicity to some of it as well. People say that Ege Bamyasi is actually more accessible, but I don't think that means it's less interesting, and I actually think these are ever unfolding sightseeing tours, these tracks, as you listen to them more and more, that you sort of lock into them and they become more interesting pieces on repeated listens. Can definitely knew what they were doing with creating an album that on the surface sounds more accessible. They're playing with the ideas of the mainstream, the ideas of commercialism, and that's there to see on the album art, which is clearly informed by someone like Andy Warhol and his pop artwork. Suke has said in the past that this record represents the lighter mood of the band, that the recordings are slightly more ambient and drier, and I think that's where the steadiness of this record comes in. Yeah, I think on the surface it's less aggressive than Targo Margo, but that means it has more of an opportunity to breathe and manifest in your subconscious, in your ears as you listen to it. Intriguing interludes like the midway point of the improvised track Soup feel quite calculated, which is surprising and impressive when you realise the slapdash way that this record was put together in the first place. And the musicians lacked a plan during their follow-up to Targo Margo. They had a legal battle with their manager, which kind of left them in disarray, and they found themselves right at the edge of the deadline to give Ege Bamyasi to the record company. So they were last minute throwing stuff at this record to try and get it out. And hilariously, apparently Ermin Schmidt and Damo Suzuki had this obsession with chess that had grown during the recording for this record, to the point where they were more interested in playing chess with each other than they were to get this record finished. As a result of this last-minute fluster, they improvised the track Soup nights before the deadline. It might have even been the night before, I'm not too sure. And they also threw on a previous hit, Spoon. That had to that point been the most successful track they'd ever had, which they put out as a single prior to the release of Ege Bamyasi. I love the fact that despite half the band became more interested in chess than making the record, and that they had to do an improvised jam and throw that on the record and throw on a previous single as the album closer, that it feels so well developed and cohesive. Everything just fell together spectacularly well. The drum-centric 9-minute track Pinch opens this record, Jackie Liebezeit riding this ghost-noted groove on the drums as different layers and melodic lines saunter in and out of the track. It's a very laid-back track. You get that ebb and flow that I was talking about. At one point, a slide whistle appears, which always makes me chuckle. I love Damo's vocals in this track. He jumps from a rhythmic, low-frequency spoken word to these rock and roll squawks, which aren't that far away from Jagger at his fieriest. The way Pinch rides that percussive rhythm from Liebezeit is similar to the way the motoric beat works in other krautrock groups, like Neu, for example. You become locked into that repeated groove, that underlying groove, and it allows all of the other instruments to sway and echo throughout the scape. And all the while, it feels like, certainly on a track like this, that Can are willing the audience to be delighted in the disorderly sounds that they're creating. There's actually another Neu parallel here, with the sound of running water opening up the second track, Sing Swan Song, which I always struggle to say. Admittedly, Neu's masterpiece debut record released I think it was a month before Ege Bamyasi, so I'm not suggesting that one or the other took that idea, but it's interesting that two different krautrock bands were playing with that idea of running water, the fluidity of their sound. Perhaps there's something to be said about the unstoppable flow of water and the fluidity of the instrumentation on an album like Ege Bamyasi. Everything in this track feels like it oozes, particularly with the way Jackie Liebezeit sits just behind the beat. There's that lethargic style, the loose style of his playing, which really does bring this entire record together. It really enhances that feeling. The track Vitamin C is a psychedelic pop track, really, which has had a resurgence over the last few years because it was included as the opening song in Paul Thomas Anderson's adaptation of Inherent Vice, which is a Thomas Pynchon book. And I can't think of a better way of opening that film, to be honest. It really perfectly captures the drug-addled 70s paranoia feeling, but it's also light and sunny, and it echoes the sort of San Francisco, LA, Bay Area feeling that film had itself. Again, I feel like I'm deifying Jackie Liebezeit, but his drumming here is what makes this track so great, that insistent groove, but it's loose. It's fluid. Going back to Soup, this is the improvised jam that the band did and threw onto the album at the last minute. And the wig out at the midpoint, which gives way to these electronic groans and gargles, and some of the Middle Eastern music influences that Can were known for start to bleed into the instrumentation here. It comes as a surprise after the relatively straightforward track Vitamin C, and then the fact that Soup is succeeded by two lighter, shorter, more conventional pieces really makes it the black sheep of the album. But I also think it makes it the heart of the album. It's a central focal point of it, a piece which is kind of a mangled and scary odyssey, which sort of goes against what Suke was saying about the lighter mood pieces on this album. The final track, Spoon, which is the track they lobbed on last minute, it mixes an electronic drum sequence alongside Jackie's acoustic drum performance. So it marries the electronic and the organic. And that's something that happens in the other parts of the instrumentation on this, where you have the bright synthesizers and the plucked guitars. It just shows that at this stage in their career, they were capable of creating more conventional songs, but they were still attached to developing them in a more experimental way, bringing in the things they've learned from all these different disparate influences and creating something that sounds unique. And it just reminds us that they had a lack of desire for normative rock instrumentation. They continued to subvert those trends and those ideas. It's part of what made krautrock so great, and it's part of what made Can so great and Ege Bamyasi such a great album. After next record, Future Days, was released, Suzuki actually left the band, citing the fact that he didn't really like how successful Can were getting as a result of some of the more accessible tracks. Suzuki seems like the kind of person who has a compulsion to make music. Like, if he doesn't, it'll burst out of him, almost as if it's as important as breathing to him. With that, Ege Bamyasi straddles the line between a kind of accessibility and also a compulsion to improvise and experiment. It makes for a unique, exciting record, and that is why Ege Bamyasi is a Deep Cuts essential. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoy this record. If you haven't listened to it before, we will be doing a listening party on Tuesday at 10 o'clock BST for Ege Bamyasi, so come and join us, have a discussion about the album, see what you think. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts on this record, other Can records. Let's get a bit of a discussion going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.